What's happening, guys? And welcome back to another Sunday Scan. We have a special guest on this week. We are welcoming Dawson, our Canadian representative. We have a Traders for a Cause happening in Canada this week, although it's on the other side, so he won't be attending. But Dawson, welcome to Sunday Scan again.
What's going on, eh? Good to be back. Thanks for having me, Chris.
Yeah, of course, of course. And you really came to mind because we do have that Traders for a Cause on August 13th. I believe it's sold out now, but it's great to see a bunch of traders in Canada and some people like Lanzilotti and Zach and some other people from Traders for a Cause are going to be showing up for that one. So it should be a great time. But I wanted to have you on to go over a couple of market thoughts. We'll chat for a few minutes, then we'll get into our main watches. And, we were chatting a little bit before we started recording and just talking about how in summer trading, you get these pockets where things are just really slow for a couple of days at a time, and then it'll ramp right back up. But how was this past week for you, and what were you noticing?
Yeah, well, we had that recent correction last week in the SPY that I think kind of shook a few people since the steady highs since April. And that little reset day, I think, is healthy. It's good. But also that trickle down into small caps, people weren't as eager to be chasing stuff left and right like they were back in the Open and GoPro and all those kinds of things in the previous week. So I definitely noticed a slowdown in small caps. And I've been on here talking before where I've branched out a little bit into mid and large caps when those small caps slow down into bigger picture swing type ideas. And then with SPY pulling back and people not as eager to chase in small caps, now you're not getting those big picture breakout setups as often in the large caps either. So I was kind of in the boat where I don't really know what was going on. So I was showing up every day, scanning pre-market, scanning in the evenings, looking for setups. But when I find myself actually like having to really look and go through like more scans and go to like not the third and fourth page of scan, but going into the 10th page of tickers. And it's typically a sign for me that my setups just aren't there. This week was my lowest volume probably of the year. I think this week I didn't take any day trades Monday through Thursday. We'll go over a couple of entries I took on early entries. I'm still in a few swing positions, but I didn't really scale or manage those positions until Friday. It was if I put on a swing position earlier in the week, they were starters waiting for things to set up and triggers, daily like triggers to break. But yeah, Monday through Thursday was absolutely nothing for me up until Friday. So it was super slow. I have like a small group of pod members I chit chat with, and I brought up the topic. I posted on Twitter on Friday that is it worth it to take those day-to-day trades where you're making maybe 1R, 1.5R, maybe taking a shorting gappers or those like income trades, or is it better for me to not do anything Monday through Thursday and then just go balls to the wall on Friday? And I think Friday was like a 9R day, but Monday through Thursday, I didn't place a trade. So was it worth it for me to take 1R, 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 or just wait until something presented itself and then just swing the bat hard when that opportunity shows? So that was kind of my mentality this week. Wasn't super busy, but if you get one or two good trades and really work them and size into them, then I think that's just fine.
Yeah, I think that's a great topic too, and I've chatted with a couple people about that exact same topic too. And I think that one of the things that makes sense to me is that if you were to look at like someone's trading business or their trading process, there's so many elements to it, and one of them is spotting good setups. That's an important part of a trading process. But there's a lot of other things that don't involve finding setups that are still important. So whether that's refining, if you're going back and looking at statistics, or if you're looking at sizing strategies, or studying market cycles, or other things, there's things that are very relevant to a trader's overall success and process. And when the market's really slow and the amount of setups decrease, I like to lean into the other areas of the trading business or the trading process that can still improve the overall expected value of someone's career, but aren't directly tied to the amount of setups. Because I think that there's a fine line between, chasing decent setups and, keeping things as long as it's still positive versus just kind of, spinning your wheels and wasting time on some of these things. I think Buffett had a great quote. He said, not many people have gotten rich off of their 15th best idea, and just talking about how really sticking with the really the good ones that stand out to you is an important part of, any kind of trading or investing strategy.
Yeah, yeah. David Hanlon's done presentations and stuff on that. He calls them needle movers. Phil Godecker's talked about like paper cuts, but then swinging the bat hard when those A plus comes around. I think everybody's kind of got the same idea. They just kind of explain it and say it in different ways. But I think it's important, especially like earlier in your career. You have a smaller account and you do need to stack up those singles. But once you're in that spot where you don't need to trade every day, you're not there for income, then maybe that one trade a week, maybe those few a month that really move the needle. Like if you're looking at like an overextension multi-day runner, there's plenty of them that will go, maybe 1 to 3 in a few days, but open that goes from 40 cents to $5 on billions of shares. Is there something there that tells you that that one is just a little bit better than the other one you were trading? So I think putting that criteria in place and having that set of rules, and like you say, not spinning your wheels in that in those subpar day to day, you can still get that 1% better. It just doesn't have to be clicking the buttons.
Yeah, totally agree. And we just had a new Trading Takes episode with Matt Monaco that came out. So Sam and Matt did a great episode. So I encourage everyone to check that out because they really talk about small caps, the small cap cycle. They do a lot of recaps of the movers that were super active in July. So definitely recommend people go and check that out. But before we get into some of the main watches that we're going to go over, I'll give the disclaimer now that neither of us are financial advisors and these are not buy or sell recommendations. Everything that we're going to talk about is for educational and informational purposes only. Dawson, what are a couple things that you have on watch for the upcoming week, knowing that this past week was a bit slower, but it seems like, if crypto's ramping again, if you have some money floating around again, the correction in SPY is, leveling out. It seems like some things are becoming more active and more in play. So what's on your watch list? What are you really looking for?
Yeah, as people start to come more risk on, it's not something I'm going like when we did have runner after runner. I don't mind trying to pick the next one as money starts flowing from one to the next. But as we're not having those 100% gappers, people just aren't as eager to throw money at the market. So I'm going to wait for runners to come, maybe wait for those short trades start to come in, those overextension mean reversions. But then once runners start coming in, then I might start looking for small cap longs again. But for now, I've got a couple sectors in the nuclear basket, precious metals, and then a few failed follow through and some bigger picture long ideas. But I'm definitely zooming out right now, going like larger time frames, daily charts, bigger picture swings. Not so much day to day right now until small caps start to pick up.
Great. Okay. Well, I'll pull up your chart and you can walk us through what you have on watch.
Yeah, sounds good. So like I had mentioned, SPY has been on a tear since early April. So I like to keep that in mind when we're looking at bigger picture and especially looking at large caps. This recent pullback, I know Pradeep was on scan, and I had similar thoughts to him that I was looking for this hard crack lower high to roll over. So I was definitely short bias last week, and I wasn't as eager to put on those larger cap swing long positions. But so far, this is just back into gap and grind mode. So until something proves otherwise, I'm going to assume that it's going to continue that trend. So with the nuclear basket, as I was scanning yesterday, I noticed some relative weakness here in SMR compared to its other basket. You can see higher lows still above moving averages, higher lows still above moving averages, and SMR puts out earnings and then gets hit under this. It had this nice little breakout and then this clear out through daily highs, macro clear out, and then lower highs. So you get this head and shoulders, 42 being the neckline. So it's pulling back here into the 50-day moving average. But I'd be interested in pops here back into 42s. And it's notable Oklo having earnings going into Monday after hours, I believe it is, after market close. So it could be in somewhat of a holding pattern until earnings hits. Nothing I'd look to predict, but I'm just going into it with more of a short bias, given that SMR in the same sector reports earnings and then gets a steady sell side. So Oklo, I've got this nice higher low trend that's held on each pullback that it looks like it's going to roll over and just touches, looks like it's going to roll over and touches, and now we're touching it. Maybe a holding pattern into Monday before earnings comes out. And then if that gets hit, it's just the dailies are just a bit too extended for me to look to long. I need a bit more tighter action if I'm going to look to long. So with them just continuing to bid up, bid up, bid up, and then SMR, I think is possibly that vehicle that if I can get pops back into 42, maybe a holding pattern on Oklo into earnings, and then look to lean on this one as it starts to fall through on the daily. And then I don't really trade this one too much. It's just a bit choppier, not as clean of a trend. But I would use Oklo as a guide once that earnings catalyst has come and gone, and then maybe look to use SMR as my vehicle off of the big picture nuclear basket. So it's not something that I predict to the short side. I wouldn't long it at this point because there is no long setup there. But there is a short setup starting to present itself. I'm just going to see if price action is going to prove that idea. If it doesn't, no big deal. Again, wouldn't need to force a trade on it, but that's just the plan I have there. And then in precious metals, it's kind of a mixed bag. There was TMC had started breaking out and it was looking good, but it failed. We had, I think it was MP was another one. This one's at all-time highs. So you've got TMC failing breakouts, MP starting to push. NB was another one I was looking at, where this one's like a smaller cap, but it's starting to trend highs. So I was just kind of scanning through that sector because I know it's been in play a lot. This one here has had a couple decent breakouts. This one here failed, but likes to put in some multi-day runs when it does start to build. We've got these wicks over here on the right side of the daily chart starting to build back above the 200. So as long as this one holds above 420s, I think this one could get going. The volume starts coming in near daily lows. So it like there's nothing up here in terms of overhead resistance. All the volume is coming in near lows as it's starting to round its bottom. And then USAR, same kind of thing. I had this one on watch each time it would push, and it would start to flag and tighten up. But once it would push, pull, consolidate, I wait for it to pick its next direction. And the next direction on this one kept being it would fade, it would fade, it would fade. Every time it would push, it would start to tighten and then would pull back. It would push, looked like it made a new high, would start to tighten and then would fade. So then we pushed, we started to tighten, and then we finally started to push higher. So it's worth a watch now that we've finally had that higher high and higher low. As it's starting to build on that daily. Like the further you zoom out, you can see the bigger picture, higher lows. So this one here, not quite as tight as I would like, but with it coming up into these looking left levels, if we could get some tightening action, maybe something like this or something like this, where we get a few inside days and the range on those daily bars starts to tighten, it would be a breakout I would look for a secondary leg through these looking left levels. But it's not really, we don't really have like an anchor with it. I guess it would be like overall precious metal sector. But in terms of like specific names, I don't really see a clear leader in it. It's kind of a mixed bag within that basket. So those are those bigger picture kind of sector moves. And then I've got a failed fall through momentum basket. This one here, this one's a biotech, and they had Ethereum treasury news. However, that fits. I have no idea, but goes on those secondary moves, likes to break out. And if you look at these intradaily charts, how many times it's cleared out into 450s, and this huge trend line that it's held since early July. And it's finally starting to give way there on Friday. Now, I didn't see this one on scan until the afternoon on Friday. I saw it after hours doing my my nightly scans, and we got this nice hard crack and started to consolidate under this massive higher low trend line. So I'd be looking at pops using these bounce highs into 320s, 330s as a guide. And I think this is a quiet fizzle. Like it should just start to fail off as long as it doesn't build back above 320s, 330s. Again, with all those clear outs, I think it's worked in enough longs, trapped enough of them to the upside, and I think we've got enough bag holders up there. So this is just it's a huge trend that it's been on, and now it's just starting to fizzle out as volume starts to peter off. And then JCI was one for Pradeep scan, and this one is still setting up. It hasn't quite broken, but it was that earnings loser, and we're getting this bear flag, possible bear flag breakdown set up. I did put on a piece into this bounce, 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 and then we got this little failed follow through day where it just couldn't continue to push higher. And I put some on into there in the 106s. I took it off on Friday just because it keeps holding. And I figured that there's no reason to force the idea and force a bias. I can just wait for 104s to fail to follow through and then can lean on that one. But as long as this doesn't build 106, 107 and continues to knock on this door of those 104s, I think the more times it tests, eventually it's just going to break. So I'll be looking at this one for that little bear flag breakdown. And with SPY's rally off the recent pullback, this one hasn't participated in it. Every time SPY continues to push higher, this one's just consolidating and not participating. So on that day that SPY does have a pullback, I guess in this market, if SPY ever pulls back, then I think this one could show some relative weakness and start to sit back with the rest of the market. And then a few long ideas. Navini, I do have a small position on this one. Nothing close to full size, just a starter to keep it in my port. But scooping dips here versus 50s, and basically the only ads would be through these 76, 80 cent line. But same kind of thing where the volume starts to come in near lows, puts in this nice multi-day move, comes back, blows out through it, double tops, which it should just start to sit back and fail. And it gives back its entire move, but now is starting to consolidate it in that sort of should have died category. And it's just starting to tighten into this larger wedge pattern. So I put some on here right around 52, 53 cents. But again, nothing that I'm super aggressive on just yet. I want to see 76s and 80s build. But given this is a scan for the week ahead, I think this could push up into 76, maybe consolidate for a day or two before re-breaking out to highs. Again, that tightness is what I want to see when it starts, when I'm looking for breakouts. So I will keep that one on watch. They've kind of cleaned up their dilution. They're not super dilutive as they once were. So I think it could get going if demand starts to pick up and that volume comes back in. Hood, currently swinging this one with the early entry here through the 107, 108, these prior highs. Earnings was back here, I think it was 731. I'd have to look. But we got the earnings came out, this little undercut and rally of this looking left 100 whole dollar, and it reclaimed and started to build. But I don't want to anticipate this support crack holding. I want to wait for it to prove. So now we get this higher low and higher high. So I join it here, adding throughout the day. I locked some in there into the 116s on Friday. But big picture wise, through 113s is the horizontal breakout level. So as long as this continues to build, doesn't fail sub 108s, and ideally weak opens continue to hold versus these 113s, then I think could build a position and look for that 120 plus type of move. Just the further you look back, it likes to grind. We've had plenty of these setups. Right here starts to tighten and break out, starts to tighten and break out, starts to tighten and break out, and it likes to go on those multi-day moves through those breakouts. So whether you're holding through this whole move or you're locking and then looking for the next setup and then locking in, looking for the next setup, I think either one has merit to that strategy. And then the last one here, NEG. The IU put out a post on X or Twitter on Friday, but I laid this one out in the room with my plan, entries, and exits, and was just tightening through this breakout, started to tighten, got a couple inside days, and then finally broke out through that 62, 63 spot. And that was just a really clean trigger. It was a bit too quick right through it. It just swiped right through. So I took the approach of scooping dips into these pullbacks, risking versus low a day, and then just adding through that 70 big picture breakout, pyramiding in, moving risk along the way. But same kind of thing. This one, I think it could still go higher. If you look at how this name in particular likes to act, where it starts to expand and then speed up, and it likes to go on those multi-day runs through those breakouts. So I think this one has a 100 magnet in it. I currently have no position. I locked it in yesterday, Friday. Yeah, Friday. I locked it in here up into the low 80s. But weak opens versus these 70s, I still like, as long as it builds, maybe pulls back into those 70s opening range highs, and then look for that that range expansion day up towards 100. So a few long ideas, a few short ideas, and then some sector watches. So plenty on watch, but as you can tell, not a ton of small caps, more just bigger picture daily ideas.
Great. Yeah. Ton of good information there. A lot of good watches. And I think that, especially if the market is starting to pick back up a little bit again, there should be plenty for people to sift through and find what works for them, what makes sense. And then, just to see what the action is on Monday, because again, if we have another SPY flush, that can, totally change things. So assuming that the market is still, pretty active, pretty in play, I think a lot of great watches there. And then I have some similar thoughts. You had Hood on there, kind of as like the perfect example of like relative strength. And then, I have a coin here as an example of relative weakness during that, market unwind and that crypto unwind. And now you're back to a point where, maybe 20, 25% off the highs. And you're starting to see, that was very consistent, heavy volume selling. And really what that was related to is they had earnings that were very underwhelming. And earnings season this quarter, I recently saw a chart of what the options were pricing in, and then versus the realized move. And the realized move has been much, much higher than almost any of these stocks have been pricing in. So that doesn't always happen, but it's basically a way of saying that this earnings season has brought huge moves, much more than a lot of people expected. Because sometimes, something will have good or bad earnings and it will just kind of hang around. But in this market, good earnings are, really gapping, and bad earnings are really selling off. So I have coin on watch now for kind of a bigger picture, right side of the V, potential bounce trade. I like to look for the names that after a huge pullback, and they put in a pretty good low around a key area, so around that 300 area, you're starting to see a little bit of that bounce now, but it's going to be anchored to crypto prices, at least somewhat. So if we start to see Bitcoin and Ethereum ramping again over the upcoming week, I think that that low will at least be a good risk point for a potential bounce trade if this starts to go again. But understanding that it is a bounce trade and definitely not like a trending relative strength kind of name. This is relative weakness, but you can have some good bounces off of a key risk level. So I will keep that on watch for myself. And actually, as a good example, if you take a look at this action and this volume, you'll see it will remind you a lot of CoreWeave. And you can see after these, big pullbacks from the highs, you can see that consistent volume selling down here. And then, if you were to draw a trend line on top of this, and then basically a trend line underneath this, you get an X somewhere around here. And that's a good area that you can use as a risk level, just to see a trend change. So CoreWeave also had news that, so the company is trying to buy CORZ. An activist investor in CORZ is trying to block that deal. And so basically, if CoreWeave was selling off because the market didn't like them doing that deal, and now you have an activist investor trying to get that deal to not happen, I think that's why you've seen such a large bounce off of CoreWeave. So this will be on watch. Again, a similar plan to Coin, just kind of that continuation of a bounce there. And I like to talk about with these that can be potential reversals if the factors that were dragging them down are now in question. So if that deal was dragging them down and now that's may or may not happen, that's enough for it to really bounce and break that trend. So reverse a little bit there. So that will be on watch. Apple, this was a huge mover over the last week. They basically announced another $100 billion investment sometime in the near future in the US. And in exchange for that, the administration is kind of sheltering them from some tariff stuff. So that was a huge, benefit to the company. And you could see they had okay earnings, but their growth has really been in question. But I think the tariff thing was really weighing on the stock too. So now that tariff risk is less, you had a huge move here. And I think that a setup, Apple will be on watch for continuation, but I think an interesting setup that will affect Apple and UNH this week, which I'll go over UNH in a minute, is you have Berkshire Hathaway's 13F filing, I think coming out on August 14th, which I believe is Thursday. And so a 13F filing is basically when you have either a large fund or someone with a ton of assets under management. When they make big quarterly changes to their portfolios, they have to update the market, I think within 45 days or so. So for Berkshire Hathaway, that time comes around August 14th. And what that will show is maybe Buffett has been unloading Apple. And if that's the case, and that shows, if we have a good run up and then we get news like that, you could get a good mean reversion flush back down, I think. Or if he hasn't sold anything, then that could just help the trend continue. So just be on watch for that 13F filing. And then I also think that will be a huge impactor of UNH. We had this big, secondary move down after this capitulation level broke, and now it's just been consolidating. And I think that the market is waiting to see, is anyone stepping in or is there going to be a change? So now, granted, the 13F filings are delayed by, a month or over a month. But I think if you saw any increase in Berkshire buying, I think that will totally reverse UNH. But if there's no change or if there hasn't done if they haven't done anything, no buying, then I think that it could have its next leg lower. So again, plan for two opportunities there, and just really watching that 13F filing if that comes out. eBay has been on relative strength watch. This is flagging nicely. They had really good earnings, gapped up, and you can see how tight it's getting in here. So I think this will push back past 100 in the near future, especially if the market is strong. And then on the flip side, LLY had earnings, and they also had bad data, basically showing that their product is not as effective, or one of the products that they were testing is not as effective as some competitors. So that had its biggest down day in the last, couple of years. And I think that this will be very similar to NVO when that had its big unwind, until eventually you came into some big levels looking left. Over here, you can see it was a pretty substantial move. And then you had that bounce. I think LLY is going to be in a similar boat until it gets probably into, some of these levels, maybe 600 or, the high fives or something like that. So that will be on watch just as a trend unwind, and then eventually bouncing into key levels. BE, this has been on watch. It's kind of like a swing name with the AI power stuff. And so I think Oklo has earnings on Monday, I believe. And so that will be a big, tell for the sector. I think if Oklo has good earnings and the sector picks back up, then maybe this will be on watch for a break to all-time highs, in the next month or so. And then I think if Oklo has bad earnings or if something goes wrong with it, then this can unwind with the sector. SBET. So these are like the this one and BMNR. I'm not sure if I have BMNR are on here, but basically the Ethereum kind of treasury plays. BMNR actually is probably a better example to talk about. So basically, had the huge run up initially. Then they were raising a bunch of money, a bunch of dilution, but to buy Ethereum. And so they gave an update around here that they were able to accumulate about 3 billion in Ethereum or Ether. And then you still have this trading at maybe a $6 billion market cap or upper fives. So basically what happens with these plays, and you saw this with MSTR2, is that over time, as long as they're actually doing what they said they were going to do, you tend to have compression in the multiple to NAV. And so if they have 3 billion in Ethereum and the market cap is, 5 or 6 billion or something like that, over time, as long as they're diluting and doing that, a lot of times they'll just compress. And so you can have these bounces and then another fade off. And just over time, instead of these giant swings up and down, you'll just kind of have it tighten up into a baseline. So that was just a topic I wanted to touch on. Snow has been a relative weakness watch. There's been a couple other names like DDOG. So these have been on watch for downside, possibly related to some things with like Amazon's earnings and AWS. So just a kind of a sector thing to keep on watch is some of the software names or some of the things tied to the cloud or software. They have been under pressure. And then you already covered Hood. ASTS, a little bit of weakness. They had an offering somewhere around here maybe, and then they've just kind of been unwinding. So this name is kind of known for these big flags, these big moves and reversals. So I think probably some more pressure until you get a change in volume, a change in trend there. And then Joby, this had a nice unwind after some earnings coming into support, possibly a bounce. But if it fails to follow through here, I could see a big unwind. So those are the main names that I have on watch for the week. And again, a lot of it is just going to depend on what actually sets up for the week. What is the market doing? And you had some news about Trump putting in some Fed members and basically trying to get the next Fed chair lined up. And I think what the market's really taking from that is that, especially with the jobs data, the short-term interest rate might come down, and then the long-term interest rate might go up. And so that affects the bond market and some other things. So that's why you've seen gold and some other things doing some of the big upside moves that you have seen. So I know that was a lot of topics over there. Dawson, any thoughts on any of those?
Yeah, I heard some similarities in us both watching the earnings coming out of Oklo in terms of those energy names. So I think we're both on the same wavelength there. The 13F, I wasn't paying much attention to that, so that's definitely a good note to keep in mind. Those Apple and UNH and stuff, I do own both of those in like a longer term account. Apple I've owned for years, but UNH I bought in the recent pullback. But I don't really day trade those names. Those are more longer term ideas. So I'll keep them on watch for more of the investment style stuff, but not a ton for the day trading stuff. And then in terms of the Ethereum treasury stuff, I find it almost laughable. It makes me laugh. Usually it's a fad that comes and goes, and it's just had such staying power in the last month or two that just name after name can put out a PR about it, and BMNR can still be holding at $50 or $60, and it's just it's entertaining for me, and it makes me laugh.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's also related to, the price of ETH has been, doing pretty well. So I think that if ETH were falling apart, I think that these names would be right back down. But it's kind of like, I compared it to MSTR, back in the day. It's like if a company is raising money, if sometimes they're using leverage, they're diluting, they're doing whatever. It's like going out and buying a stock or something like that, like using credit cards and personal loans, like all these things, and like going all in on that. And as long as the stock itself is doing okay, that you're kind of going all in or being reckless with, then it works. But once you get on the other side of that V, that's when it all falls apart. So basically, we're going to see some interesting action over the next cycle with these names. But for right now, as long as ETH is still going up, I think that they're still in play.
I did see Ethereum. Yeah, they had that quadruple top basically at 4,100, and I saw it starting to break out of there. It was in the 4,200s this morning, so it's definitely continuing higher.
Yeah, and these are all great names to keep, on watch for the other end of the cycle. Drawing those key trend lines, the key levels, and everything like that. Because whether it's in a year, or 2 years, or whenever the cycle changes, those are going to be key things, like we saw in 2022 on the way down for some of these things. So, but it's nothing to jump in front of at all. It's more just to wait and to keep them on radar until they're ready to set up. So I think we covered a lot of good topics. Any kind of closing market thoughts for the upcoming week for people?
Yeah, I think the main thing that I'm especially keeping in mind is that same mentality of, if nothing sets up, I don't need to be trading. Just waiting for the edge to present itself. And I'm not really super gung ho anymore for those 1R, 2R trades. I'm gonna wait for those big picture setups to really show themselves. And you'll see plenty of people trading anything under the sun all week long. Everyone's got different styles, but taking those little pieces from everybody and figuring out where you fit in, and then just waiting for that to present itself. So I think that's really key. It was key for me last week, and I think it's based on scan. I think it's going to be a key mentality going into next week as well.
Totally agree with that. And great mindset to handle those slower periods, and really just, I think it's a good time to work on, things like patience and things like that for a lot of people too, because when the market's been hot for a while and there's been opportunities every day, all day, people get into the habit of, there's always like the next trade that's just, a couple minutes away or an hour away. But if that next trade is a day away or 2 days away, do people really struggle with that patience to sit on their hands, to do something else, to improve their process in another way? or, and if that's something that people struggle with, that's a good thing to work on, because that ability to be patient and the ability to say no to, mediocre setups in order to say yes in a big way to the right setups when they come. I think that's a huge, sign of trader maturity as people, go along their journey. And, the old adage that less is more, it can really, add up, and it can help a lot. So great thoughts there. And then again, we have the Traders for a Cause in Canada, in Toronto, this week on the 13th. So a lot of people will meet up there. But thank you everyone for watching. Leave a like, subscribe to IU, and leave a comment of, what topics or what guests you want to see on Sunday Scan next. And we will see everyone in the room in the week ahead. Thank you, Dawson.
Peace.
Thank you everyone for watching. If you want to trade live alongside me and other members of the Investors Underground community, then check out investorsunderground.com to see if becoming a member is the right decision for you. They have some of the best technology and a lot of great members there, all looking to help other people improve their trading. And also check out Investors Underground content on YouTube and Twitter. Thank you.